Unreal Engine 5 LOD automatic generation. So the case study will be a 3D model obtained from Photogrammetry. I will also provide the link to the case study 3D model. We see that it was created by 3D HD scan, and it made use of over 1000 photos for this. So this is a statue of a hunter from the main building of Konopiste Castle. I have it over here open in Google Maps. So we see this is the castle. If I'm gonna zoom out, we're gonna see that this castle is located over here. So it's quite not that far from Prague. So regarding the 3D model, we see that it is quite detailed. I'm gonna go just a little bit in full screen over here, and if I will swap this to wireframe, I'm gonna see that this is the wireframe of the model, and this is the base color and the final render with the shadows from Sketchfab. Okay, I already have the model downloaded, and I started with the first person template over here. I'm gonna add the model. So in order to add the model, I'm gonna go into downloads, and I'm gonna add all those elements. So over here we have the statue of a hunter 3D model, and I will select the 3D model and the textures, and I'm gonna add them over here into Unreal Engine so that the software will convert them into not Unity, so into Unreal assets. Okay, so I'm mostly used to Unity. We see that some of the maps have been imported as normals. We can check those. So if I'm gonna double click on this, this is the albedo. This should be sRGB, so I'm gonna leave it like that. But if I'm gonna check for the other, so over here we have the ambient occlusion one. We can have that disabled. But I'm mostly gonna use the roughness, so this one. I'm gonna have this not checked as sRGB, and I'm also gonna use the diffuse one, which will be this one. So this will be diffuse. Okay, in order to add the 3D model, I have it over here. I can drag and drop it, and I see that the first problem with the model is that the scale is quite small. So I'm gonna scale this up to 10 times on each. And after that, I will just press the end button in order to position the model directly on the floor. We see that it's not properly aligned, so there's a small gap underneath it. We can undo the rotation, and we can slowly snap it a little bit, and after that I'm just gonna clip it to the floor. I'm gonna disable the grid snap so I can go smooth, something like this. The next step is to recreate the material. So I'm gonna go for a material. I'm gonna name this the same as the model, just with an underline and texture. And over here I'm gonna drag the diffuse color, so this will be the base color of the model. I'm also gonna drag the roughness, and we also have a normal map, and the normal map will go over here for the normal. So I'm gonna have this applied, and if I will jump back to the scene, I will have the material that I can either drag and drop on the model, or I can open the model over here and I can have the model applied directly, so like this. Now if I press F, I will zoom in on the model, and I see that the frame rate is quite low. I see over there that there are some performance mainly with the video memory card, so that is the GPU card. I can also decrease the speed. I'll go like this in order to slowly position the camera around the model. So now the performance is a little bit lower than usually in Unreal Engine, since I also have OBS recording. But let's take a look at the frame rate. So I'm gonna jump back to the scene, and I will see that by default with the scalability settings set to epic, the frame rate is around 36 FPS. I'm also gonna display the frame rate over there. And let's see within this, so it's somewhere around 70 FPS like this, but the model stabilizes somewhere over here, so there are quite a decent amount of frame rate, so between 35 and 40 depending on the distance to the model. Also, if I will press F1, I will see the wireframe of the model, and I see that the frame rate with wireframe is set to 120, which is capped. If I will press F2, again I will see that the same frame rate, the same high frame rate will be enabled, but there are no shadows within the scene. And with F3 I will see that the model will stabilize roughly around 40 FPS. If I will go to engine scalability and I will go over here, for example, for low, I will see that the frame rate will highly increase, but there are some lacking details. We see that the scalability is set to low. Even with shadows, we can get around 120 frame rates without any problem. If I'm gonna swap again, for example, something like high, I will see that it will be around 50 frame rate. For the following part, I will go with the epic settings. In order to address the level of detail, I'm gonna have the model again open, and we're gonna see that by default we have this LOD auto enable. So currently this is the LOD 0, that is the most highly detailed model. We see the current number of triangles, and as I move further away from the model, I see that it will still remain the same model. So we need to have the LOD generated. One main advantage of Unreal over Unity is that this can be done automatically within Unreal Engine. So the possibility over here to go to LOD auto, and after that we can have that generated depending on some settings. So I will go over here, LOD auto, I'm going to enable custom. We're going to see that within the advanced section we are going to have only the first LOD, so that's the original one. But in order to have the software to generate the other LOD, we are going to go onto LOD settings, and we have some predefined elements. So regarding the final position of the model within the environment, we can either go for something like a small prop, if this statue, for example, will not be in the main screen. But for the case study, I will go with a large prop. We are going to see that we receive a message that some of the settings will be override. I'm going to click OK, and by default Unreal Engine should create 4 LOD models for this. We're going to take a look at those. We see that the texture is quite detailed for this model. Now currently it's processing, but I also want to open a texture file to see that. I'm just gonna go for the one in Windows. So I know that we use this one, so we see that it's a 6 megabyte texture. If I'm gonna go to details, so the dimension will be 4096 by 4096. So this is roughly around 16 megapixels. Currently, Unreal Engine is processing the LOD, so we see that now those have been processed. And now we have over here the possibility to visualize LOD 1, 2, 3, and also 0, which is the original one. Now, Unreal Engine is set to LOD auto. That means that as soon as the camera will move, so we see that over here there's the transition between 0 and 1. If I'm gonna go to wireframe mode, so Alt and 2, this will be still LOD 0, so the initial model that I downloaded from Sketchfab. But as soon as I will step a little bit forward, we're gonna see that we're gonna have the transition to LOD 1, which will be by default set to 50% of the triangles. And if I'm gonna move even further, I'm gonna see that LOD will take action after this distance. So we have current screen size 0.7, and we also have LOD 3, which is the lowest, in this case set like this. If I'm gonna go again to lit, I'm gonna see that that will be the model. And if you want to override some of the changes, you will need to change the LOD so it will no longer be on auto. The possibility to disable that custom. I'm gonna select, for example, LOD 1, and we're gonna see that we have the possibility to change the percent. So for example, this is set to 50. I'm gonna go with something even lower, like 35. It's important that we also click apply changes, and we see that Unreal Engine will start to reprocess that mesh. So this is usually done in Blender or 3ds Max or other software, but Unreal Engine has the possibility to directly reduce the model density, so the number of vertices and triangles that shape the 3D model. This will take a little bit to process, so it shouldn't take quite a lot. So we see that it's already has been applied, and we see that this will be set to 35. Now if I'm gonna go even lower, for example, maybe for 3, I'm gonna heavily reduce this, something like 3 for example, and I'm gonna click apply changes. And we're gonna see that for LOD 3 the model will lose a lot of the details, for example the head of the hunter or his spear will become quite low poly. But we are going to see also how we can decide at what distance the model will be swapped with the LOD version. So we have the final reduction. So this will be set to 3%. We see that it's not that bad. If I'm gonna press Alt and 2, I'm gonna go into wireframe, so this will be the LOD 2. We see quite a little bit of geometry over there, but it's not that bad. I'm gonna go to lit, so Alt F4. We're gonna see that this dog also has been heavily deformed. So if you take a look at his head, all those triangles are really visible. But now we can define when exactly we want LOD 3 to be available. So regarding this current screen size, in order to override those, we're gonna need to have this unchecked, so auto compute distance. And as soon as we're gonna check that, we're gonna see that the selection for the screen size will be enabled. So maybe, for example, we want LOD 3, which is the lowest, only to be active somewhere after maybe 0.15. So we only want LOD3 to be active over there. And we want LOD2 to be active. I'm just gonna go to auto and see. So over here we have LOD2. And we're gonna have the swap going towards 0. So we see that between 0, 1 and 2 is quite a short distance, so we can adjust those. For example, maybe you want LOD0 to remain, for example, even higher than 1, maybe 1.5. After that, LOD1, 0.8. And for the following one, something like 0.5. And if I'm gonna go back to auto, I'm gonna see that even at this distance, so this is below 1, I'm gonna have the LOD1, so the high detail model, we see the two dogs are really detailed. And as soon as I'm gonna step a little bit forward, this will be LOD1. We're gonna see that model. And over here we have LOD2. We still can identify the dog's mouth and face. And somewhere over here should be LOD3, but now that model is quite far from the screen, so there are only few pixels defining that the dog head or the hunter head, so it's not a problem. As soon as I'm gonna press F to frame, I'm gonna see that the software will swap back to LOD0. So now I'm gonna jump back to the scene. I'm gonna minimize this. And we see that now we have the LOD in action, already active on the mesh. If I'm gonna press F1 over here, I'm gonna move further away from the model. I see that the LOD over here is like this dense. I'm gonna stick on the dog head and see. So over here we have the swap between LOD0, which is the original mesh, over here LOD1, the first decimated model, and as soon as we are gonna go further away from the model, that should change. But now, since this FPS scene is quite small, we are mostly gonna be somewhere between LOD1 and maximum of 2. Okay, I see that the frame rate like this is set to 30, and now I'm gonna try to multiply this model. So I'm just gonna have it reposition over here. I'm gonna go and swap to the modeling section of Unreal Engine, and I will choose to define a pattern using this model. So I will go to pattern. I will want the model to be multiplied on the y-axis, and on a total of let's say something like this, 2500. I will want a total number of 20 counts. I see that they are a little bit overlapped, so I will slightly increase that, or maybe just add 18, so those will no longer be that overlapped. I see that the frame rate is still stable now like this, so we see quite a decent frame rate considering the specification of the computer. I will also choose to have that applied. I will swap back to the selection, and again I will go into play mode to see the frame rate. We see that the frame rate has dropped, so it's currently something like 18. And as soon as I will only frame one model, like this dog, it will be a little bit better. But we see that it's quite heavily lagging in this case. Within wireframe we have the 120 FPS, but as soon as we add shadows, we see that the frame rate drops and we see the screen lagging. Okay, so this is the performance using the standard LOD model generated by Unreal. And I'm also going to swap to Nanite to see if there are any difference within the same settings. So for the engine scalability, again set for Epic. To do that, I'm initially going to delete the pattern. So I will delete that once in order to have that pattern removed. I'm going to open the content browser and I'm going to select the model. And over here I'm going to activate Nanite, and I will enable Nanite for one mesh. We see that the software is currently preparing the model for Nanite. We see that the shaders are being prepared now, and we have the final build. As soon as I swap to Nanite, I see that there's a video memory, so we see that quite a lot of megabytes are over the budget. So as you know, I'm currently on a 970, so quite a legacy video card from NVIDIA. And we see that it can handle that the Nanite visualization. So let's go into play mode, even if we have that megabyte warning. As soon as I'm gonna go close to the model, I'm gonna see that it will be something like 20 FPS with the current settings. And if I will press F1, I will see the Nanite LOD in action. So this is again working the same as an LOD, but in real time it will change the topology of the model. We see that the frame rate are quite low, like this with Nanite. Now let's try to pattern this again. So go up to modeling, pattern, and again I'm gonna position 18 statues, just like in the previous case with LOD. And if I will press the play, I'm gonna see that the frame rate are quite closer to the ones from the LOD. So if I'm just gonna look at one statue, somewhere between 20 and in some cases even 30 FPS. But as soon as I will look towards the other statues, I will gonna see that the frame rate will drop heavily. So again, if I'm gonna press F1 in order to see the wireframe, as soon as I'm going closer or further from the model, those meshes will be optimized. So there aren't many, let's say, changes. The main advantage of Nanite is that it goes a lot faster to optimize. If you have additional models, you just swap those to Nanite and they will automatically be converted. And if you also have an older video card, you can go to the engine scalability and maybe pick something else. For example, like this, if I'm gonna go for medium. And I'm gonna take a look at the model. So they are still quite detailed, so they are not that great shadows, but overall the frame rate are quite constant. As you can see, even if you interact with those, they will rarely drop between 60 frame rates. So this is really important to also change the scalability, even if some of the elements, like for example the first person blueprint for the gun is quite low poly now. We see that it's quite edgy. Overall the performance will be a lot better. Okay, so I hope you find this video useful. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section. Also, thanks for watching.